Welcome to the Conscious Dominance Podcast, where Andrew and Eric, two dominant men in dom-sub relationships, discuss how we approach our dominant roles from a conscious and loving place, and what we learn about ourselves through the deep intimacy that these power exchange dynamics make possible. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Whether it's, I'm in the middle of a painting and I'm looking at it and just sitting there looking at it, or I'm in the middle of a construction project and I spend a moment just looking back and taking notes on what's in front of me and what is. Doing that with ourself, and especially with the inside of ourself and the parts of us and the outside. I'm not to say it's both are important. And for an obvious way that I think a lot of men can relate to is we look at our bank accounts. That's taking stock, taking inventory. We go to the gym and we'll lift weights. We'll know that's taking inventory. We'll step on the scale. That's taking inventory. We'll look in the mirror. That's taking inventory. We will show up to something that we have been good at in the past, whether it's a sport or in a speaking or whatever it is, and then be confronted of where we are in that. That's taking inventory. But it's also privately, it's what do you do when you're sitting, when you've gotten triggered, or when, and we specifically here are talking about being with our woman, being in a relationship, that the relationship itself is a way of providing feedback that then elicits an opportunity for you to take inventory. And that taking inventory concept, I think, just like I think about the metaphor of a construction project. If people are in the middle of building things, you can notice things, but you don't do nearly as good a job at assessing what's going on the project when there's a bunch of activity going on and a bunch of people. The best time to do it is at the end of the day when everything's done, everyone's gone, to walk around and really look at the job site and see what's happening. Same thing in a relationship. There's whatever's happening in the moment, but we need to take inventory as like a time apart from whatever's occurring where we sit with and almost replay what took place. I kind of think of it as it's like an audit. It's an emotional audit. It's also just an opportunity for us to do, like an action report. Like there's an event that took place and a crisis or something that was handled. And then, in school, I was a teacher and there was an incident and you have to write up an incident report. In relationship, it's just a woman's tone of voice, or just the way she reacts and whether and how you handle in that. That's an incident that if you don't catch and you don't take stock of, you don't take inventory of, you're literally building that relationship upon sand. It's on something that's not solid. The solidity of a relationship is in this place that I call like a field. It's an energy field. It's a charge. And we're very familiar with this. You walk into a room when there's new people there, someone walks in, you can feel their energy. We respond to energy. And especially women respond to our energy. And if we're not able to sort of take inventory on both the obvious external parts of our life, but also the interior inventory, we're not going to be effective as leaders. We're not going to be effective in the relationship, in the bedroom, in these different areas. And so when I said, let's talk about taking inventory, taking stock, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's something I talk to men about a lot, because if we don't do this thing you're talking about here, we can really end up in a place where we lose touch with reality, where we lose touch with the facts, because, men are extremely sensitive. I think on this podcast we're probably going to say that about 1,000 times because it's something that guys need to understand and learn to accept about ourselves, is that this the way that we can tune in to women and feel them is both our greatest power and strength as men, and also the thing that makes us the most vulnerable. And when we are in the presence of any woman, but especially one with whom we're in a deep relationship, the line between being tuned into her and becoming enmeshed with her in a codependent way can be a very thin line. And it's very easy to lose touch with truth, with the facts, and to get meshed into something that looks more like codependency, where you are reactive to her emotions rather than present with them and leading her in a way that is connected to them. So this this is what I do in the mornings. Like, I'm awake somewhere between 1 and 3.5 hours before dawn, because years ago I stopped having her set an alarm. I stopped having her get up at any scheduled time. She sleeps until she's done sleeping and then gets up. But I wake up every morning, usually right about 5 a.m. without an alarm. And in that time in the mornings, I meditate, I journal, I do a lot of this keeping inventory and taking stock and looking at where am I exactly in my life right now? Where am I in my leadership, in my inner strength and my self-worth? And I look inwards a lot in that time, those quiet hours in the morning when I'm just sitting there with a cup of coffee in a journal.
Yeah, I think that's well said. It makes me think of that old school book, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of a Highly Effective Person, and the one is sharpening your saw. And this is, we think about any tool that's worth its salt, there's maintenance that you have to do on that tool. If you have a car, like the better the car, it seems like the more the more you're in there cleaning and taking care of and tending. And we need to do that with ourselves, and especially with the inside of ourselves. Because what happens is, I think of going back to the car metaphor, if there's these gauges on the car, the woman is a gauge. Our body and our emotions are a gauge. And if we're just trying to not feel those things and repress those things, it's literally putting tape over that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear that from you. I don't want to. And that's when anytime we get defensive at all, that frequency of being defensive, that means we don't want to see the gauge. We are uncomfortable with the reality of the gauge. And so, what you're doing in that moment when you wake up in the morning is you're sitting with what is. Like, you're sitting with the reality of what the fuck's going on in your life, and you're not folding. And if you feel like you're folding, you let yourself fold there. You let yourself feel the full ramifications of that, and you don't numb it. You don't sit there and try to avoid that feeling, but you sit there in it. And when you can do that, then later on, when she comes at you with the very same thing that you already know about and felt into, you're not going to be triggered by it, because you're like, I got this. I know. And you don't even have to say anything.
Right. I look at this from this perspective. Control is inherent to dominance, right? Being in a dominant role in a relationship is about being in control. It's about taking control. And if we're doing that from a place where we have not gotten in touch with reality and with the facts, then we're trying to take control based on how we feel, based on something that's maybe less firm and less solid. And if we aren't taking control and leading forward from a place of looking at what's true and trying to make it better, trying to take charge of something and lead it to a better place, then we're going to still exert control, but we're going to use it as a repressive mechanism. And the same thing, the same piece of our masculine essence that leads us to want to take control of something and to make it better, to maintain it, to work on it. It's the same thing in guys, back to cars, like that makes us want to put nitrous oxide in a car and racing slicks on and see how fast we can go 0 to 60. We always want to improve things, but we are going to, in these dominant submissive relationships, we're going to take control. But if we aren't doing that with a clear fucking picture of the reality of what's going on inside of us, then we really risk using that control to try to shape her into something that doesn't make us uncomfortable, or something that doesn't trigger us or doesn't upset us, rather than dealing with the reasons why we get upset. And again, back to your point about inventory, we don't know why things are bothering us or what's going on in here unless we're willing to sit with it. And we have to do that. Otherwise, dominance gets controlling, it gets domineering, it gets unhealthy.
Right. And we got to call ourselves out on how much are we doing this to perform it? Like, how much are we doing this so she sees us as dominant? She sees and the world sees us, or we're trying to perform our masculinity, but it's not in our core. It's not in our authenticness. It's not in our being, you know. And I think metaphors are really helpful. And I think about at the gym, you know, just for lack of a better place, let's start with the bench. You look around and you notice what guys are benching. It's one thing to put that on there and bench and have bad form, where you're all over the place and you're not really doing it from a place that's good form. And sometimes in life, if you have bad form, you've got to go backwards, take the weight off so you can move forward. And this part of us where we sometimes have to go backwards in life, maybe we lost a job, maybe we're sick, maybe we've been unhealthy in the way that we've been doing our life in any way, shape, or form.
Maybe
It
we
looks
dropped
like
one of those weight plates on our toe when we're
exactly, which I did, by the way. I dropped a weight on my toe and couldn't lift. It was embarrassing. Fractured my foot. So I know, and my life has been this feeling, a series of going backwards. And I think one of the things of this theme of taking inventory and taking stock, especially as we get older, life isn't about, it's not linear, and it's not always about a product or achieving something, though that's a part of it, and that's an important part of the metrics, but that's an incomplete part of it. And sometimes, especially with women, and especially when you're dealing with the feminine energy, your capacity to just hold her and not solve the problem, not turn her into a product. You guys put a podcast out a while ago where it was all about the emotions of the feminine. And it was all about how you were able to really take her, and you've said this a number of times, so you really focused on this, but take her, all of it as feedback. And one of the big caveats of that, it's almost it's a mind fuck for us, is not about solving it. It's not about judging her emotions and saying, oh, there's good emotions and there's bad emotions, and I want her to have the positive emotions. And if I'm failing as a dom, if she's having the negative emotions, and if she's expressing negative emotions, I want to fix those negative emotions, hurry up and get through them. I don't want to hear them, or I want to fix them. And then she feels like a project that you need to fix. And when she feels like that, she's not going to want to express the parts of her that are not. And often those parts that she's starting to feel, it's literally a testament to your capacity to hold her, that she feels safe for the first time in her life to express rage, to express anger, to express things that for lesser men could not handle. The world cannot handle that. So you can hold that. And you said that really eloquently, that when you were able to do that there, you were able to do that when you're driving a car and there's crisis or other moments. It's weather. Like, how well can we go and move through the weather that's coming at us? It's very similar. We're not trying to fix the weather. You don't go to the weather when there's a storm and you're like, oh, I'm going to fix the weather. That's the reality. And you don't let it defeat you either. You work with it. And then pretty soon you can start surfing
Well, one of the things that happens here is, you talked about this performative nature, how we can get in this performative dominance, is performative masculinity, where we're trying to just act like it,
Yep.
don't actually feel like it. But if we are just acting like it, she's going to sense that we're faking it, because she's also extremely sensitive. And
Yep.
and I say she, I mean any woman is extremely sensitive to the weakness of a man.
And then she'll fake her. She'll fake her orgasm.
Exactly. Because she's afraid of losing you. She's afraid of being abandoned. She's afraid of
Right.
not being lovable and not being enough or being too much. So she'll start to shape her expression when she senses your weakness. And so
Right.
then you end up with two people who are faking it for each
Yep.
other.
Yep.
And the way that I talk about this is the ways that a dominant interacts with his submissive are like the outer shell of our of who we are. It's the very, very outer shell of it where we touch. And I think about this like the line where the yin and the yang meet in that symbol. Right? This is the line where the darkness meets the light. It's the line where the masculine meets the feminine, where we touch. And if we're faking anything, that line isn't pure. It isn't clean. We're touching each other with unclean spirits, with unclean souls, because what I'm bringing forth is a pretend version of what's actually inside. And that's why so much of this work isn't about making a username that's, dommaster782964 on Instagram, putting a couple pictures of other people up there and saying, I'm a dom now, submit to me. And it's not about that on the submissive side either. This is like, it's so unclean,
It's
because yeah, where our true dominance lies is within us. It's our spirit, it's our soul, it's our essence. So if we want to bring clean, pure dominance to her that's not performative, we can't just try to do doming right. We have to become more dominant inside us, at our core, all the way down inside, and like deal with those little self-worth issues. We have to deal with those little things that hurt us when we were boys, and we've got to do that heavy duty, shitty, hard, tear-jerking, emotional healing work, not because we need to go like cry out our feelings, but because when we do this, we actually just clean up what's already true about us inside, which is that we are masculine beings. We are strong. We are solid. We do deserve to be loved. We do have the best intentions at heart when we are trying to lead and take charge, and we want to lead everything in our life to a better place. But if we haven't dealt with this shit that's stirring around inside of there, then that's when we get that unclean line, when we're not pure in the shell of it where we touch her, because we just brush her when we give her a command, when we lead her, when we make a rule, when we establish a new ritual, when we do any of these dom sub things. That's just where who I am is touching who she is. And that has to be as clean and as pure as it can be, so that it's not manipulative, so that it's not controlling, so that it's not domineering, but so that it's love and it's caring, and it is really an expression of the truth. And that's our job, to help bring her into her own cleanness and purity, and to bring ourselves into our own cleanness and purity, because we are the consciousness, we are the truth. That's our job. That's who we are as masculine beings.
well said. And I think a big part of it too is what you keep saying it. And I think I want to just expand on something that you've said in your podcast, you've said it here, is when the woman's range, you receive all of it as love. Because really, when she's able to trigger you or cause something in you, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, there's a weak point there. It's like, wouldn't it be if somebody was inspecting your car, your house or something, and they pointed out a place that was weak? You want to know. You want to know if you have even the word integrity, when it's used in an architectural way, it means like how much is it able to hold?
Yeah.
So integrity becomes something that you want to be testing that integrity constantly. So get with a powerful, strong, intense, passionate woman, and she will constantly test your integrity. And instead of quieting her down and pushing her down, you actually want to turn that up. And you start holding it. And her sexuality will test that, because her sexuality will go beyond, like, you can hold this and it'll go beyond what even you can hold. Any woman worth her salt, her sexuality is going to go beyond the confines. And so if you start getting triggered by that and her sexuality and how it sort of just bleeds out here, and all of that, though, works in this relationship because of the loyalty, because of the integrity that's there in the relationship. But there's a tension that exists, and that tension that exists where it's held, but it's pushed up against its edges. That's hot. Like, that becomes something that you're like, you have to show up to, and it asks something of you, and you can't just like rest on your laurels.
Well, so let's look at the practical ways that this plays out, because the way that it plays out in real life is every time that I make a step forward in my expression and in how I'm showing up, in the man that I am, and maybe who I see myself capable of being. Once I put that out there, once I bring that into reality by talking about it, by embodying it, by just showing up differently, now that woman, Dawn, for me, is always going to, if she loves me, she's going to say, this is who he's saying that he is. Is he showing up like that? Poke, 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 poke. And every single little piece of me that does not show up in alignment with that, in integrity to who I've said that I am, she's going to find it. She's going to feel something in response to that lack of integrity. And I'm going to have to decide, am I going to say, thank you, that sucks when you point it out, but you're right? Because if I want to be who I say that I am,
Right.
then I appreciate you poking me in the place where I realize I need to be better. Or am I going to say, I'm trying really hard. Can't you see how much better I am than I used to be? Like,
I've definitely said that.
so have I. We all have. But then the problem is we end up comparing ourselves to perfection.
Right.
And I'm talking men, like, it's really easy to put yourself in a position where now you become the victim of your own desire to be better
Right.
by saying, I'm never going to be perfect. I'm never good enough for her. She's always wanting more. It doesn't matter what I do, it's never enough. And then putting ourselves almost in this victim mindset,
Oh yeah.
when what she's really doing is saying, this is who you said you were, not what I'm seeing in your
Right.
actual
Right.
actions. So which one is it? Are you this guy who's doing this, or are you this guy that you said that you are?
Right. And holding yourself there, that's the crux. Like, that's the juice. Like, how do you hold yourself in that tension between wanting to improve, be better, improve, get that, but not be the victim of that perfectionist place, where you are constantly in this movement towards something that's towards excellence, but where you don't falter when you realize that you're not anywhere near that, where you're the standard that you're holding. That's
Mhm.
the grace that you have to hold. I think of, you know, two of the values that I live by that are really strong is grit and grace. And we need both of them. We need the grace along the way, but we also need the grit to get up, keep going, keep going, keep going, and the grace to allow ourselves to get up. If we beat ourselves up too much, see this with so many men, they just flatline because they don't want to admit where they are. Because to move forward is to admit where you are. Like, if you're going to go get in better shape, the first thing you have to realize is you're out of shape. And that feeling of showing up to the gym when you're out of shape, I have so much respect for these people that come to the gym and they're like barely able to lift anything and barely showing up. It's like, oh, you're starting that and you're going to keep going. And we often can re-feel that when we get injured. You know, I had an injury recently, and you know, I literally did. Here, you weren't kidding when I did drop a weight on my foot and I fractured my toe and I couldn't do certain things, and it took me, I couldn't walk without a break. I mean, it was embarrassing. It was an embarrassing thing to happen. But to come back to that, you can give up, or you're like, oh, this is what this is. I'm going to learn something from this experience. And as trite as it is, there's a reason why again and again and again we have to relearn these things. These things like integrity and ethics and grit, they're not just buzzwords that we just can throw around and like talk about.
Yeah. And if you really desire integrity, this comes back to the whole topic you brought here today around taking inventory or taking stock of your life. You can't have integrity if you aren't living in the truth, if you don't know where you are right now. And trying to be better means accepting where you are.
Yes.
And that, that gets at your point too of the tension between where you are and where you want to be. But I've never improved myself without really coming to a point of acceptance of the reality of where I am right now. And whenever I tell this to people, the response is always, I don't accept where I am. I want to be somewhere else. How can I accept where I am when what I really want is to be over here? I want to feel really strong and self-confident, and I doubt myself constantly, and I have this constant like anxiety inside of me and discomfort. So how can I accept that? You have to, because it's real. You can't make an incremental improvement in reality if you're like trying to avoid even looking at what
And
the
maybe
truth.
the word, we don't like the word accept. And I want to like parse, let's spend a moment with this, because this thing is something that I've really worked on this year, is really trying to understand, because I get when those guys say that, because you're like, I don't want to accept this. This is crap. I don't accept this reality. This reality sucks. I'm moving from this and who I am to over here. But what I know from experiencing this is there's a word of maybe allow, like it's just sitting with what is a way that I think about it. Like you have to sit for a moment with the reality of your life. Like your house just burned down, or like there's rot, there's I had mold in my house. If I just don't accept the fact that I have mold, I have to accept it and deal with it. I have to face my reality. And part of it, though, if you don't have some frequency that's gentle with yourself in that moment, you will be pissed at yourself the whole time. And there was a great meme that Rachel showed me. She said, if being hard on yourself worked all the time, it would have worked by now. Like, and it was, and yes, we have to have standards, and we have to be hard on ourselves at certain times and certain moments, but especially when we're really feeling very vulnerable and we're feeling really weak and we're feeling really in a bad state, we have to be accepting. We have to be gentle. There has to be this frequency, because if we don't do that to ourselves, we're going to look for the world to be that to us. We have to provide the gentleness and the kindness to ourselves in those little moments. Otherwise, we're going to go out in the world being needy, and we're going to want the world to be gentle. And guess what? The world's not gentle. It's not kind, and it's not soft. And as long as you don't provide it to yourself, you're going to look to your woman to provide it. You're going to look elsewhere to provide it. And that's some fucking truth right there. You've got, and this is the radical self-love. Like, that's what it is to love yourself, is in those moments, in what is simultaneously. It's like a little boy. It's your own little boy. Be like, dude, I see it. You've had a rough time, buddy. and accept that that's okay where you are. And guess what? We're going to get up. We're going to keep going. I saw that you got hit, but we're going to keep up and we're going to talk to ourselves in ways we never were talked to. My dad would increase the volume when I didn't know something. And all of a sudden, it was pure pandemonium because I didn't know a math problem. That voice still is in my head. It's like, you're a piece of shit because you don't know. And that thing is as a high tilt and it doesn't go away. I've had to relearn and recalibrate and reparent myself in these little soft little moments. Because when I can do that, then I can rise and do incrementally better. And then I'm stronger. And then I'm not seeking my woman to provide that for me. I'm not seeking drugs to provide that. I'm not seeking, why do men do all these things like drugs and all these avoidance? They're looking for the world to be soft to them. They're looking to feel like easier in their soul. But what they're doing when they're doing them, they're stunting their growth because they were not sitting with the hard truth that they're kind of a piece of shit in the way they're doing things. And so you have to be able to like sit with that and love yourself in that and keep going. Like the truly loving thing is not to allow yourself to be, that's otherwise, that is the enmeshment. You're enmeshing yourself with yourself. Like there's an identity you have with yourself that you're holding yourself back and you're holding yourself in this state that's just mediocre, and it's a compromise, and it's this state because you don't allow yourself, you can't sit with the reality. And as long as you can't sit with the reality, you're fixing something that's up here, and there's a gap between where you are and where your reality is. And as long as there's a gap, it's like fixing the house and the studs got full of fucking mold and the foundation is fucked, and you're fixing all this shit up here, and you don't want to take the time to take the house apart and spend a year going backwards and doing the real fucking hard work that it takes. And that's what most men don't want to do. They don't want to do the hard work that it takes to face their reality and be gentle with themselves in that process and reparent themselves and come back. And there's no way to be in that Dom energy unless you can do that.
Yeah, because I say it like you're running 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction, but you've been running in that direction for so long, thinking that the solution to your problem is over here, and I got to keep going harder and going
Right.
faster,
Right.
and this isn't working. I'm not like I need to do more of the same thing,
And
which
yeah, you keep doing the same thing, thinking you're going to get different results if you just work
yep.
harder and go grind and be and be and be and be.
And you'll tell that person or yourself in those situations in doing the same things and expecting different results is insanity, but then that still doesn't make you recognize that what you actually have to do is take a deep breath, sit down with the pain of what you're running away from, what you're avoiding, what's that gauge on the car that you don't want to look at because it's pegged all the way to the wrong side and there's a blinking light on it, and you're just drinking your 11 Coors Lights at night so you can numb yourself out enough to go to sleep, so you which is basically just covering up that gauge so you don't have to look at it for one more day, thinking
Right.
that maybe tomorrow if I make a little more money or I get in a little better shape,
You
then
won't
maybe
feel that.
this thing that is screaming at me in my life that it's
Yep.
not working, that something's off, something's not right here,
Right.
that maybe doing more of this will make that go away, or at least I know that I can have, that I can drink a half a bottle of whiskey or smoke some weed and
Right. And
get by for one more day.
I think that's why there's a mother and a father. And then like in archetypally, the mother is there to provide the unconditional love and the father's there to provide the conditional love. And I think a good way for men to understand is you need both. You need unconditional love and you need conditional love. You need to kick your ass and you need to love yourself always. Like you need both. And that tension between the two, that's the masculine and the feminine. And we have to provide in ourselves the feminine. Like we have our own feminine. And if we're not finding a way to be in touch with that and hold ourselves, we could use the word weakness, we can use whatever. And I don't, when I say weakness, I mean like a place where we feel vulnerable, which is a place that we have to also be really courageous in that. And there's a tender place, and there's a gentle place, and there's a soft space. We have to protect that, yes, but we also have to sit with that and not ramrod it and shove it away. And our capacity to do that with ourselves is our capacity to do that with the world and with our woman and with other people. And so that tension between that conditional love and that unconditional love, that's really what we're trying to speak about here. And I think that's kind of like when you said that about the drugs, it's like we're looking for a cheap version of the mom. We want that thing that just will like soothe us no matter what. Like, why do we like to have a cigarette or a drink? Because it doesn't give a shit about us. It loves us no matter what. We'll feel that same way no matter, we don't have to earn it. Why do we love a prostitute or whatever? We don't have to earn it. They love us. So what we're actually seeking in those moments is unconditional love. We're seeking unconditional positive regard. You, as long as you can't provide that for yourself, you're going to seek elsewhere. But the first place to start is just to allow ourselves, like, that's where I'm trying to get at that word accept. It's like, it's okay. I'm right where I am, but I'm gonna be able to get up and I'm gonna keep going.
I want to talk a little bit about the word weakness that you use there, because I know at points in my past I've just despised the idea of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a disapproval in itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I can't, I don't, I won't ever accept weakness. I'm going to make myself strong. And the way that I would deal with weakness was to try to make who I was trying to be, this front, this facade that I was putting out into the world, I would try to make it bigger so it would cover up that weakness, so that I wouldn't feel it and that other people wouldn't notice it.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, weaknesses are like those soft spots. And when you are walking across a floor and your foot goes through the floorboard and you find that weakness, that's what these conscious kind of dom sub masculine feminine polarity relationships, whatever you want to call them, that's what these things do, is they show us where there's soft spots in the floorboard that we just
Yeah.
stepped on and our foot
It's
went through.
it's important information. And if we just ignore it and shove it away, we won't want to hear it.
And we'll
Well
keep
said.
it over and over and over again. Our whole life we'll just keep stepping in the same damn hole, because we're so ashamed of the fact that we're not all we don't already have a solid floor, we don't already have a solid base.
Right.
We get so fucking ashamed of ourselves and
We'll
so
just avoid that
embarrassed.
place in the hole. We'll just walk around that spot. We'll be like, oh,
Yep.
that's weak right there. So I'll go around that. And we won't actually do it
Forever.
ever. Yeah.
And that's how most people go through their lives, avoiding pain, avoiding weakness,
Right.
because they don't think they're supposed to be weak. Well, guess what? Everybody's got these soft spots. Everybody's been
Right.
hurt.
Yes.
But if we spend our whole lives just finding them and then avoiding, that's how you watch people's lives shrink as they get older. As
Yep.
they get older, as we should, and I believe can, continue to gain more wisdom, more awareness, more understanding of the world, and our lives can expand and expand and expand, get better, get bigger, get more fulfilling, more rewarding as we get older. That can only happen if we step in a hole and we realize, oh shit, there's a hole there. Didn't realize that was there.
Right.
I'm I'm going to slow down right now and patch this thing up.
Right.
Because otherwise, then you end up with entire like sections of your life that you avoid, don't think about, numb out from. And then as you get older, your life shrinks and it gets smaller, and you can't talk about this and you won't talk about this, and this will trigger me and this will upset me. And then you start telling your partner, don't do this, don't say this, you can't say this, don't ask me this like that, when you say this, say it like that.
Right.
And you just limit and limit and limit and limit and squish and just shrink your life into something that's so small because you're afraid of weakness. But you can just deal with those things. You can make yourself better, but you have to accept that they're there. You have to be willing to see them.
Yep, exactly. Well said. Well said. I mean, it's really a clear way of saying it is are you a victim or are you seeking a way out of this victim? And the way out of being a victim is not by just creating a fortress around any place that you feel a victim. Like that's the model that we think, oh, here's where I feel a victim, so I'll build all these walls around it.
Mhm.
Instead of curiosity, it goes back to what I talked about. There's in the brain, there's these two pathways, the rage pathway and the seeking pathway, or place of curiosity or place of trigger. Can we go to the place of curiosity and come back to this place where we feel weak and be able to address it? And that's where we can get creative, because creativity is a big part of this. A lot of times the solutions, especially as we get older, they're not just by working harder and longer and more ferocious and more this one sort of volume of the masculine. It's really in incorporating other ways of being and thinking, and that's really where the creativity becomes a really important component of this.
And well, a lot of what we think of as strength, at least for men, we think of our strength as being the walls that we put up.
Yes, yes,
That being strong means being able to protect ourselves against our weakness.
right.
But being real strength means dealing with the weakness so it's not there anymore and you don't need the fucking walls.
Oh, how strong is it when a woman is able to like call you out on all your shit and you just are like, yeah, and you don't react?
Mhm.
And you're stoic and you really can hold that energy. And like you said, I mean, this is a great, anybody that comes into an emergency situation is able to just stay calm in that. That's the true strength. It's not saying, oh, you can't have the emergency situation, or you can't have the storm, or you can't have whatever things going on in your external world. Otherwise, you're just a victim of the external world and you're trying to control it all the time. That's actually the true weakness.
It only triggers you when a woman points out something that's true about you and
Oh,
you don't like the fact that it got seen because you were trying to hide it.
100%.
And that feels like weakness, but what it really is reactivity. And to be able to do what you said, where it's like, uh-huh, it's you either already know what she's pointing out and it's something you're aware of about yourself, or you just have an acceptance of the fact that that's how she feels right now. Maybe there's something in that for you to see about yourself that you can learn from, that you can improve, and you can do that without having to make yourself wrong because you haven't built your entire self-worth around trying to hide.
Right. I think that's well said. And going back to identity and what you just said there made me think about this. Um, when we have our identity in our relationship, and I think this is a really important thing, and it might be worth starting here and then coming back to this on another future podcast, but the taking inventory, one of the things of taking inventory is, are you putting your identity in the relationship? Like if the relationship is the priority in your life, like is how you get your sense of self-worth primarily, your sense of value as a man, your sense of feeling like you're the dom, you're the this. If you're looking to the relationship to source that, if your identity is primarily in it, that's when you have the enmeshment that you speak about. That's when you become codependent to her. Then when she's upset and she's this, it's affecting your identity. This is why when we talk about, men talk about your values, it's not just like we're talking up our ass. Like it's literally that's your identity, independent of the external world, independent of her, independent of these things. You need to have a sense of identity. Men used to have this when they were very religious, when they were part of an army, when they were part of, military. Still men have that to this day. But if you're deciding and you're not a part of something, some group or something that can give you an identity that can withstand the machinations of everything, you need to come up with that. You need to have that. You need to be clear about that. You need to develop that. You need to strengthen your identity separate from the relationship. It's right for her to put herself and her identity in the relationship. That's more of a feminine sort of gauge.
Yeah.
Whereas the masculine, we have to have an identity and a value system that's beyond the relationship.
It's the role of the masculine to be the initiation, to be the one who takes charge, starts, and leads. It's the role of the feminine to add the feeling and the energy and the aliveness to wherever it is that she's being taken. And, I would even go a step farther to what you said and say, it's not even about finding a group to belong to have an identity outside of the relationship. I would say for me, it's been getting in touch with my authenticity
That's what
and
I was saying, that there's options to do, but
yeah,
ideally it's your own version, because that group will let you down too. And I mean, sooner or later, everything will let you down. It's external to you.
right. So authenticity is the ultimate identity. And if your authentic nature can become dominant, then you don't have to source your dominance from the fact that she's submissive, right? If you're
Right.
only dominant because she's submitting to you, she's in charge.
Yeah.
Completely, she owns your dominance. If
Yep.
you are only dominant because you have a submissive or because your submissive is obeying you or following you or wearing your collar, she's not your submissive at all. You are her submissive because as soon as she decides not to be your submissive, you've lost your entire identity. You've lost everything that you've said that you are. So you are not in charge of a damn thing if your identity of dominance is wrapped up in her submission.
Right. Yep. And this is where, like, if we are living our life for followers, for money, for external validation in any type, when that dries up or there's something that comes up that impedes that, we'll fall apart. We will have a breakdown. And that's where, I go back to the tarot, I bring up the tarot, but that's the tower card. This tower card that's falling, that's the structure of our ego coming down and breaking down. We need to build that into our life. If we're not able to handle these breakdowns, our capacity to handle egoic death is our capacity to be a dom. Like, can our ego die continually in a regenerative way, in a way where we can come back and find strength and find erection and find our movement forward, and our ego come down? That play, that's really where the dance is. That's when you start becoming a master. That's the exquisiteness that we're talking about.
Yeah, and just that shows up in just being able to continue to breathe through the realities of life.
Yeah.
When you step in the hole, to not be like, God damn fucking holes,
Which I
but
did. Believe me, I've spent my life being like fucking old, fucking making the hole bigger. You're like pissed.
patient zero. Like, I'm not claiming that I was born with some ability to not be triggered or upset by shit. It
Oh,
still
every
happens.
single
It
house
still
that I
happens.
had for like the first 20 years of my adulthood would always have I got to be really good at fixing drywall and sheetrock from all the well, you know what I mean? And sometimes I have permanent knuckles that are hurt from punching things that I thought were drywall. It turned out to be a brick wall or another wall or something else.
Ouch. I used to have rental properties, and whenever I would rent guys, I would find far, far, far more holes in things when they moved out. Same thing. But I call this raging at reality.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah,
just pissed off at the truth of what's happening in the world, you can never actually get to a point where you are making making art out of it, where you're making something better out of it, where
Yeah,
you're actually improving it and dealing with it. You can never deal with it when you're wishing it wasn't happening. Like,
right,
how can you ever make something better when the only thing you can do is be mad at the fact that it's there in the first place?
right. But I do want to give this caveat though. Being angry at something is better than giving up completely. So it's a stage in the ladder. Like there's a stage along the way, but don't get stuck in the anger place.
There's always a place for anger, but for me, I've never found anger to be a helpful emotion when it comes to self-improvement. Now, are there things in the world that deserve anger? Absolutely. But and maybe you need to be angry at yourself for not seeing what you couldn't see or for not dealing with what you didn't deal with. And if that's an emotion that you have, by all means, you need to move it, you need to feel it, but absolutely don't get stuck there because nothing changes. And we're not here just to get pissed off about what's true. We're here to see what's true. That's what makes us masculine beings, is to see the truth, to speak it out loud, even when it's fucking hard, to
Yep.
say what's real, to say what's true, and then to make something out of it. And then that just comes back to simple consistency. Just show up and work on making that thing better. And if you do that a little bit, you'll heal that weakness, you'll heal that soft spot, you'll deal with the actual root cause of what the problems are. And then you don't have to avoid this shit. You don't have to teach other people how to avoid it or build these walls that make you come across it like just impenetrable and solid and unavailable and shut down and rigid, where you can be more present. We can't be present when we're hiding behind walls.
Yep. Right. We've got to weave these energies together. Like you can use anger and maybe feel anger, but you can all simultaneously, can you witness that anger? Hold yourself in that without shaming that, and then act. And we can kind of move these two things together. I feel like one of the big things that I've learned that's given me more peace than ever before is this capacity to hold two opposing thoughts at the same time, to be at peace. It's a paradox, and not be in a place of like a tug of war where you're not doing anything, but to be able to move forward. I mean, that's what courage is. Courage is literally you're scared and you're still got some hope to move forward. Like that is the definition of courage. There's no courage when you're not scared. Like the definition of it is you're scared. So you're holding a thought and a feeling, and yet you're still able to kind of move forward. And that glimmer of hope, this is where, I used to, when I hear religious people and I was in religion and stuff, and people talked about the importance of faith. I really understand that now, because faith, when you've lost love and you've lost everything in your life, when there's just a little glimmer, it's like a fire, and their fire's out in the morning after the campground, but there's a little ember, and there's barely a little ember. That's faith, like that little ember, and that's precious. Like say it's wet and there's still something that's there, and that's the only, you're gonna care about that. Like you're gonna tend that, and you're gonna be really gentle with that, and that's faith, and that's the part of us that we can like improve upon and move forward with. You don't want to beat that part up. You don't want to be like, oh, you look at you, you're a little piece, like all you got is that ember, and then like stamp on it. Like that's gonna do really good, like you've got to like nurture that. And then once it's flames building, then you can be a little bit more rigid and structured, and kind of keep that at bay. But at the beginning, we need to build that fire up and then be really rigorous with it. I think the metaphor of fire is a really good metaphor for what it is to be a man and a masculine.
Yeah, because otherwise we come back to this idea that we think our strength is actually what are the walls that are
Right.
keeping us separate from anything that can be love to us, and that can
Yeah.
bring more aliveness to us. Like the things that we want are the very things that we can't have because of the walls we built to protect ourselves.
Yep.
So we think we're keeping ourselves safe, but we're really just keeping ourselves from having what we want.
Yep.
So I think that fire metaphor is about as good a place as any that I could think of to end this conversation, because the the truth is that guys have a real opportunity to become way stronger and way more solid than they are just by dealing with the truth, by being willing to take that inventory of themselves, of their lives.
And I want to just say too, the places that we think we're weak at or that we're vulnerable at are the places we're most afraid to look. Those are the places that are going to be the places where you're going to be able to have your gifts and your strength. They're going to come from your capacity to deal with your weakness. And that's something we can come back to, but I've learned that again and again and again. So thank you,
Yeah,
Anne.
that's where all the growth exists.
Yep.
Thank you, Eric. Good conversation as always.
Awesome.
See you next time.
Yep.